and the state of the United States. I'm going to mention a few things about Hong Kong. It's been a while since I went live, but I did an interview today with a media outlet in Hong Kong, and so I had the camera set up for doing that, and I decided to go live and teach you a few things about Hong Kong and about the United States and low intensity conflicts. I'm sorry, I'm looking out the window. About the state of the events in the United States. Please let me know if you can hear the audio. If you can, we'll get started right now. And but let me put on any comment if you can hear the actual audio, and we'll get started. I'm going to teach you some very interesting things about low intensity conflict and the morphology of what is actually unfolding in the United States and what unfolded in Hong Kong, what unfolded in Afghanistan and Iraq and many other conflicts I've been into. Let me know if you can hear okay. Wei Sean, hey Wei Sean, good to see you. And I'm using that hashtag that you mentioned. Hey Pastor, and I'm losing that. Thank you for the idea on that hashtag on the invest in resilience. And all right, Corbin says, sounds great. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn the comments off for now. So I'm not going to see it as you're commenting, and I'm going to go in and tell you a few things, and then I'll go back and look at the comments. All right. For starters, actually, while the comments are on, I want to ask you a question. What color is an alligator? What color is an alligator? Hint, hint. You know, my Florida Gators hat, by the way. I'm from Florida. And Florida has, I don't know how many estimated alligators now, but last time I was there, an estimated 1 million alligators. And I used to see them all the time, every day. What color is an alligator? What color do you think? Well, let me tell you what. Almost everybody thinks that alligators are green. They think they're this color. They think that they're green, or they think that they're brown. But newsflash, I grew up hunting alligators. I grew up seeing alligators every day. I know what they smell like. I know what they taste like. I know their behaviors. I know how to hunt them with my hands. I don't need a gun. I don't need anything. I can go catch an alligator with my hands. I can call the females. That's how you call a female alligator. That's the sound their babies make. When you do that, females come. You don't even have to do that all the time. It'll hurt your throat if you do it too much. I know, I've done that. But what you can do is record it and play back the recording. And anyway, so yeah, so alligators are actually black. If they're wet, they're black. If they're gray, they're dry, period. Now, some people, I've been through this, they'll say, oh, but I live in a different part of Florida. I live in Mississippi. I live over in Texas where we're at. They're green. No, they're not. They're black. They're black when they're black. They're black when they're wet. They're gray when they're dry, period. And I even went to the top alligator expert at University of Florida one day, rode my mountain bike out there near Payne's Prairie, if you know where that's at. I walked in the door. He had a giant bald eagle, living bald eagle right by those things are scary when you walk in and don't know you're going to run right into a bald eagle. And I asked him this question. I said, hey, I've asked a lot of people, what color is an alligator? He laughed. He goes, everybody thinks that they're green or brown. And he goes, they're black when they're wet, they're gray when they're dry, which is the perfect answer. There might be 2% of the people out there that actually know that. And like my grandmother knew it off the top of her head, you know, because I used to bring alligators home and we would eat them. Anyway, bottom line is, but according to all the media, 1 million license tags in Florida or more, license plates, University of Florida's got it on their stadium there at Gainesville. You know, what's the name of that stadium? Is that Yon Stadium? Anyway, it's a huge stadium there, and there's green alligators all over the place. Everybody, green alligator T-shirts. They're black. It's the same with the media about what's going on all over the world. Constantly, there's very few great sources. I'm going to tell you some things about conflict that after you listen to this for a short time, you're going to see a lot of things that you never saw before and that most of the media just don't get right, period. And there's a lot of, white too, Mike says, albinos, there's extremely few. And those are like super obvious. You're like, okay, that's an albino. The albino alligators are about as common as albino people. When was the last time you saw an albino person? And so, I mean, they're really not that common. And so, but, you know, it's period. They're black. And so I like to use the example of the green gator phenomena because people will actually argue about it. They'll be like, well, the gator that comes up in my backyard is green. You're like, okay, I've probably caught more alligators with my bare hands than you've ever seen in your life. You know what I mean? They're black and they're gray when they're dry, period. Except on the bottom, of course, they can be a little different color. If they're babies, they can have gold stripes. I know. Hey, listen, let me tell you how much I know about alligators. That's the sound babies make, and their females will come. And, it's funny. I was reading an Encyclopedia Britannica or something one time. Where would I read that? They're like, female alligators are not known to, where was that? Was that in Britannica? Are not known to defend their young. Let me tell you what. Don't get between a female alligator and her baby. I don't care what the books say. I'm telling you from experience, you're crazy. And so, likewise with war. I'm going to explain a few things right now, and then after this, you're going to see conflict in a different way than you've seen it before, unless you're like 1/10 of 1% of people that knows what I'm talking about. And actually, interestingly, even when I went into Special Forces, it was still in the 80s, right? And there's different generations of Green Berets, right? There's the ones that started in the 50s after World War II, the CIA and the Green Berets, they formed they formed together but separately, right? One was the military aspect, which was Green Berets, that's what I was in. And then there was CIA. There was a split from organizations before that, and then they became CIA and Green Berets. But they've worked together ever since, right? So if you find Green Berets, you'll find CIA, that sort of thing. So throughout those early years, up until the 80s at least, there was heavy emphasis on insurgency and unconventional warfare, not just like high-speed, kick-down-doors type stuff. Some of the new Green Berets I talk with can't quite track with a lot of things that I'll tell you now. But the ones my generation, and especially the ones right before my generation, who were my mentors, they know about low-intensity conflict very well. And it's something that I know very well, that's why I was able to go to Iraq and go bang, 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 this is what's going on. And, it took a while. Took some months to go rummage around. And then Afghanistan, it was much quicker. And look how my predictions have withstood the test of time extremely well. Likewise with Hong Kong, and I'm going to explain some of that. Let's get into it. All right. So, and if there's any question about, I'll get to those questions a little bit later. And then I'll go back. Hey, Nizar, and I'll try to answer as many as possible. But let's talk about things that you're going to see unfolding, and then when you hear me talk about them, you'll know more than most of the journalists just by watching this. All righty. All right, so I've switched to my iPad screen. Yeah, I'm Apple. Don't get me started. All right, so let's see. I hope you can see the screen. You should be able to. Let me turn those comments back on. If you could see that screen when it was on. And Barbara, we're going to talk about the morphology of, what are you talking about, Mike? I like Summer of Love. Let's see. I told Steve Bannon that twice, too. He's like, it's a joke. And I'm like, why is it a joke? You should change War Room Pandemic to War Room Summer of Love. And I think, well, whatever. He's got this sense of humor a lot of people don't get. Okay, so I'm going to present something. Okay, so Nancy saw that white screen. I'm going to go back to the white screen. I'm going to draw some stuff. I'm going to teach you some stuff that's really interesting. All right. And I'm going to show you why I was so quickly able to identify that Hong Kong is in an insurgency. And once I realize that there is an insurgency on, that should change your paradigm and how you view the situation, and it will make your predictions about where it goes next much more accurate. If you have the wrong paradigm and you look at something and you go, oh, these are protests, then your paradigm will be so off that you won't be. And if you identify something as an insurgency, then you also must understand a lot about insurgency. Like when I can identify something as an alligator, I still have to know its general behavior patterns, which I know quite well. And likewise with insurgencies, they have certain behavior patterns. I was talking with Gordon Chang about that the other day as well. Yeah, and there's still no travel back to the United States from Thailand, but I am coming back as soon as there is. Let's get to this, because I think the United States may be going into insurgency. All right, let's talk about, I'm going to do 3 different screens. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to start with one screen. I'm going to draw something out for you. I'm going to talk about the continuum of conflict. Let's see here. That should draw. Okay, there we go. Right, there we go. So you should see a line that just went across your screen. Actually, let me pull up my iPhone and I can see if you're seeing what you should be seeing. And make sure to hit share and share this out, by the way. If you're looking on YouTube, which will have much better quality, you can hit the like button and hit the bell so that you can always get alerts when I go live. Because once I got back to the United States, I'm going to go live a lot. Okay, I see on, I see on my iPhone here that you do see the screen. All right, so the bottom line here is your baseline, right? Now, this is your population. Up here on your top line will be your population, right? So let's talk about Hong Kong or the United States. Hong Kong has a population of roughly 7.4 million, depending on what you believe. And United States, roughly 330 million people, depending on what you want to believe. But generally, there you go. So let's talk about the differences between protest, between civil unrest, and between general civil unrest, and between insurgency, and between civil war, right? Now, let's start. In a healthy society, you're always going to have protest, right? Here, it's like an EKG. You see this down here, these little lines popping up? I mean, that's your, I have to clear so I can see what you're seeing. And so, just one moment. There we go. There we go. Good. I can see it. And so you will see protests are normal. But as a function of the overall population, the number of the people in the protest are quite small. In other words, let's say, the teachers are protesting about something, and they need higher pay or something. And so the actual population is much, much bigger, and you're getting a small amount of protest. I mean, if it's teachers, it's going to be, if it's just teachers about higher pay or something like that, then you're going to end up with, just small but protests are happening all the time in a country like the United States or Hong Kong, which is known as the city of protest. There are always protests, right? And some protests can be a little bigger if they're about something else, if you get more and more people involved. But this is what's important. In protests, which always are happening, there are usually specific people that are protesting about something specific, like teachers want higher pay, right? Something like that. And if you fix that or find common ground enough, then people will stop protesting, right? And then the next day somebody will be protesting about something else. That's normal. That's part of a healthy society, right? And then there's rioting. Of course, we all know the difference between rioting and protesting. And so these are what we would call protest, right? And protests are always on, protests are always on, they're always on in a healthy society. It's hard to write with this iPad the way it is. And so it's just protests are always on about something. It could be about police brutality. It could be about fix the pothole in the road. All right, but very importantly, in protest, you still see the government as your legitimate government. There's no question about that. You're not trying to overthrow the government, right? That's important to keep that in mind, right? You still see the government as legitimate. Now we get into something called civil unrest. And it's not just a line in the sand. It kind of fades into it. This is kind of a judgment call. You get into what's called civil unrest. So when you hear the you hear the media using civil unrest. They don't use the term. They don't use the term the way that somebody like in my line of work would, my sometimes line of work would use the term civil unrest. This will be when a large number of people are protesting, often about different things, right? It might not just be teachers. It might be generally the economy. They don't like the economy. So you got all kinds of people protesting, but they still see, and this is important, still see the government as legit, right? You still see the government as legit in protest. Not everybody. Somebody's always going to want to overthrow the government. But generally speaking, you still see the government as legit, right? Still see it as legit. Government still legit. So they don't want to overthrow the government. And with protest, you can solve it usually quickly. With civil unrest, then you'll get more people out on the streets, not necessarily protesting. Protesting doesn't necessarily mean you're on the streets. You could be doing a strike. You could be, voting for somebody. You could be doing all kinds of things. With civil unrest, though, you're usually taking some sort of action. You might block roads or something. Now we start to fade into something else. This is the continuum, right? Continuum of conflict. That's hard to, it's very difficult to write here. It's continuum of conflict, right? Here we go. I wish I had a whiteboard, actually. And so with GCU, general civil unrest, so it's civil unrest, but it's general civil unrest. Now you're going to have a huge number of people, and they're not necessarily going to be on the streets, of course. They might be protesting they might be taking action, but it's going to be a large section of this is the amplitude of the actions of the people involved, let's say, not necessarily protests, but people involved. The amplitude's much higher. Now with general civil unrest, they still see most of the people still see the government as legit, right? Most of the people still see, that's my government. I just want to change the way we do business, right? Now, when you get into general civil unrest, GCU, that's when you'll have educated, uneducated, rich, poor, maybe many different races. If you're in a country with many different races, you'll have a lot of different people because it's general. So it's a general cross-section of the people. It could be, white collar, blue collar, the whole thing. And they will have a general set of problems. Like, we just don't like you, period, the way you're doing business. We still want to keep the way we're doing government, but we want to make a lot of changes. We want a new governor. We want this. We want new president. We want whatever. But we want to keep the government. We want to keep the government structure in place, but we may want to change a lot of the people, and we may want to change a lot of the policies, and it's really fundamental stuff, right, that they want to change. So that's general civil unrest. It can be peaceful or it can be violent. Same with protests. Protests can be peaceful or they can be violent. Same with civil unrest. Same with GCU, right? It can be peaceful or violent. Some are very, very peaceful. Some are straight up super ultra violent, like A Clockwork Orange ultra violent. So now we get into something else. At this point, we're still in peacetime type situation, right? But now is a line in the sand. Now we go to war. Now we're starting to fade into war. And right. Now we're going to fade into insurgency. And insurgency, that's when you start to see the government as not legit. That's when you start seeing the government as, I want to change. I am tired of you. I want to become communist. That's not coming from Michael Yon. I don't want to become communist. But you can see a lot of people that do. They want to overthrow the government. They want to overthrow the people. They'll hang them from lamp posts or whatever they have to do to make that happen. They don't see the government as legitimate. That's when you start seeing people doing more than just blocking roads. That's when you start to see, when you get into insurgency, now we're into insurgency. This is actual war. Now, insurgencies can be peaceful. They're not necessarily always violent. Not in Category 1 insurgency. This is where Hong Kong mostly has stayed, is Cat 1 insurgency, right? and mostly peaceful from the actual freedom fighters. This is the way solidarity was in Poland. Solidarity was like that. Solidarity was mostly stayed in category 1, right? There was some violence in Poland. There's some violence in Hong Kong, but the lethality is quite, there's not a lot of people dying, right, in category 1 insurgency. But it's a war. They want to change the government, like in Solidarity in Poland. They wanted to get rid of the Soviets out of there, and they wanted to change from communist, and they wanted to become more like Western countries, which they have succeeded at doing, and they stayed in Cat 1, actually. And so mostly, there was a little bit of fade over to Cat 2 sometimes. Cat 2, now you're starting to get into, just imagine hurricanes here. Now you're starting to get into some violence, people getting killed, that sort of thing. But again, people can get killed way back here in protest. But the difference is, here you want to overthrow the government. When you get into this, you want to overthrow the government. Now we're in insurgency, right? In Cat 3, this is when like police stations are getting overrun. We saw a police station get overrun in Minneapolis. I mean, that was just one, but that was a sign. You start seeing like police quitting. You start seeing maybe army splitting apart, that sort of thing. You get into Cat 4, it gets highly kinetic. Cat 5, I mean, they're like storming the White House. Well, they've done a little bit that already, but not in a serious way. But in Cat 5, that's when you can start seeing, like total Iraq and Afghanistan type level. I mean, this is all out war, right? Cat 5. That's straight up, fully kinetic. Everybody's throwing everything they got into the fight, right? That's Cat 5. Right? And that's total war, right? Now, when you get into insurgencies, you almost always have civil wars. Almost always. Even in Hong Kong, as an example, a lot of people might say, oh, Hong Kongers are all the same. No, they're not. There's different groups in Hong Kong. Some are mainlanders from mainland China, or different groups from different other countries, and they will... And so the act of insurgency itself will cause polarization, because groups will tend to have different beliefs about how they think things should go. So those different cultures, they may side together, or they may be sort of neutral together, or they may actually go to war. And so in the United States, we could see, if we get in, it's clear that we've got some level of insurgency going on. We always do, so it's not anything new in that regard. I mean, we were born of insurgency. The United States was... the Revolutionary War was a civil war and an insurgency. That's what it was, right? And so, so we have, if we have insurgency that really grows in the United States, then we'll get into various civil wars. I think one that nobody's mentioning. I keep hearing people say China's behind this. Oh, they're helping a little bit, of course, and Russia a little bit, of course. But in reality, it's mostly organic. And one that a lot of people aren't talking about. I talked with one of my, let's say, friends yesterday who studies this quite a lot. And I mentioned to him, because we were talking China, and I said, well, a lot of things that a lot of people are missing is Islamic insurgency, which is the United States is absolutely ripe for that, as is France and Belgium and UK, and it's like the Deobandis and the TJ organization and all that. I mean, they're straight up, look at San Mateo, right? San Bernardino. I'm sorry. The attack there that came from, a lot of people are like, oh, the San Bernardino attack, remember 14 people killed? They like to write that off as lone wolf. Bullshit. That was straight up Islamic insurgency from Deobandi people. I mean, that was straight up. If people that study this, they know exactly what I'm talking about. Other people are like, oh, you're a racist, because they always throw the race card because they're stupid. Or they're part of the operation, or they're part of the enemy operation. Now let's get to something else. Now let's get to another aspect, and why you'll need to know this next part as we get into what's unfolding in the United States, and why I was able, for instance, to identify the issues in Iraq and Afghanistan and Thailand and other places so quickly and end up being so correct. It's not magic, and it's not guesswork. I mean, there's some luck involved, of course, because nobody knows what tomorrow brings. But there are things that if you know what you're looking for, and I'll give you some ideas on what to look for in your neighborhood in the United States or whatever country you're in. Here we go. Uh-oh. Let's see here. I'm going to give you a general structure. This is super basic. So the old school Green Beret guys from my era and before, and CIA types, the tiny percent of CIA that know what I'm talking about. A lot of the communist insurgents will know what I'm talking about. The people that have fought communist insurgencies on the communist side will know exactly what I'm talking about. This is a pie chart, right? You've heard me talk about that's a circle. It's a perfect circle. It's not an oblate spheroid. Here we go. That's a joke. So here we go with the, not a straight line. It's hard to draw. And this is your guerrilla force. You've heard me talk about guerrilla force before, right? This is your GF, guerrilla force. This is your big T Taliban. These are your full-time fighters. That's what they do, right? They fight full-time. And they go to training in Pakistan or whatever, right? Like the Deobandi people that have done attacks in, Europe and the United States, they go to training in places like South Africa, Pakistan, India. By the way, Spencer Rapone, that guy that graduated from West Point, he pulls back his Mao T-shirt, with his hat, "Communist will win." I'm pretty sure, I don't have proof, but I'm pretty sure he was hooked up actually with Deobandi group. I think he actually went to India with them. I'm not sure, but you'll see a lot of what's happening in these protests. One thing, I don't think people are noticing it yet, but there's going to be an Islamic component if this continues, and it's going to be significant. So guerrilla force. Now, in the United States, the guerrilla force would be your full-time BLM or Antifa or whatever that go. They're the full-timers. These are not your auxiliary or support. We'll get to that next. But the GF are the ones that 7 days a week, this is what they do. And, they're the ones that, are on message. They're, let's say, your professional fighters. But they're usually a very small group. And so as a percentage, now we get into what we call auxiliary, right? Or we'll just call them aux. Often you'll hear people call them, actually, we'll just call them auxiliary, like auxiliary police. Now, this is important, and this is one of the reasons I was able to say very early in July, just one of the reasons, there's many reasons, that Hong Kong was actually going into insurgency. Auxiliary, now guerrilla force will physically fight, right? Guerrilla force will actually, come out and do kinetic fighting. They'll, do arson and all that stuff. Auxiliary will also fight, but auxiliary fight in their own neighborhoods, right? And so they'll fight something very close, maybe walking distance, maybe driving distance, but they're not going to drive all the way from Virginia over to San Francisco or to Seattle for a fight. Not auxiliary. They're going to do something that's right nearby. This is little T Taliban. Big T is guerrilla force, right? Little T is auxiliary. Most of the people we fought in Afghanistan were around their villages, actually. They were what we called little T Taliban, right? And likewise in Seattle, probably a lot of the people in the Chaz zone right now are little T. They're not, they're Taliban or whatever, but they're little T. They're probably mostly people from Seattle and somewhere nearby, mostly. That's my guess. And based on experience, I would bet 10-to-1 odds, most of the people in there are from somewhere not far away. And then there'll be some core organizers, right? And so that's your auxiliary. Now, when I was in Hong Kong watching the fighting, I got there in June of 2019, and by July, I recognized, especially by mid to about late July, I started to see a formation of an auxiliary. Because when I was following GF, Guerrilla Force, around during the fighting at night, I started seeing people flood out of their apartments and neighborhoods and start to join GF in fighting. And because of my experience and study of insurgencies, I realized, these are auxiliary. At first, actually, I thought they were about to attack us. Then I realized they were on side. Then I said, that's auxiliary. That means we've actually got, that's an indicator of a formation of an actual insurgency. If you only have GF and you don't have auxiliary, if you only have this, that's generally if you only have this and no support, they call these terrorists, right? Now we got support, right? If you have only GF and you don't have much auxiliary, and you don't have much support, most people will call GF terrorist. But when they've got a huge auxiliary base, the people that will actually fight, but they do it close to where they live, and you've got a huge support base, that's when you start calling those freedom fighters. See, that's where you make that transition. Support. Who are support? Support people are the ones who funding, they give logistical support, rides, they might do artwork, they might do posts on Facebook. You'll see people coming on my Facebook tweet that look like their support. They're like, defending the people in Chaz, and they kind of look like they're kind of insiders. That would be your support. How big is the support? I don't know. And so they'll do funding, they'll do intelligence, they'll do artwork, they'll do logistics, all kinds of things. They'll do most things except fighting. Support normally doesn't fight, but sometimes they do. There's some people that are actually GF that also have a lot of money, and they're also support, right? So there's no necessarily hard, fast lines. So that's what you get. So you got support, auxiliary, and GF. Now there's some others like underground and that sort of thing, but we won't go into those. They're not really important for what we're talking about. And so now, and I'm going to talk about a few other things, and I'm just going to take questions. And all right, now let's get back to this circle again. All right, GF, auxiliary, and support, right? GF, and we're not talking about rioters. Rioters are rioters. They're opportunistic thugs, and they come out during, times of unrest. Now, here's the key. When GF starts doing something, and there may be, APs in there, provocateurs, agent provocateurs, right, that sort of thing. When they start doing something, if you crack down too hard, let's say with the police or the army, you can cause their support base to grow. You can cause their support base to grow. And you can cause their auxiliary to grow, right? If you're seen as cracking down too hard, their support base will grow. Now, if you're seen as not doing enough against GF or auxiliary, their support base will grow as well, or at least your resistance to you will grow. Let's say you're the people in charge, right? So a lot of the battle against GF is really a battle for support, at least to separate them from support, so that people don't support them. But what you don't want to do is take actions that cause more people to support GF. You don't want to do that, because the more support they get bigger for starters, and auxiliary gets bigger too, right? You get more and more people in the streets, or not necessarily fighting on the streets, but they'll do all kinds of things that can cause you problems. And so the GF can grow, and they can get more and more well-funded. So this is obviously the tightrope act on, if you don't do enough, then you're seen as illegitimate as the government because you're not defending people, which is a problem right now. Like in Minneapolis and other places, the government is not defending people the way that they should, right? But if they defend, then support base can grow, and also something else called FS, which is foreign support, right? Which can be Chinese, it can be others. Now, which groups will be fighting? There are a lot, and they're not going to be broken down into neat groups necessarily. There are various places, organic problems in the United States, whether it's separatist, Mexican separatists that want to take off part of the United States from Mexico. We've got a few in Hawaii that want to do the same, and they're being, we believe, helped by China. There are Islamic. Do not write these off. Do not write these off. This is very significant. Very significant. Super significant right here. And then you got BLM, also super significant. Then you got Antifa, and you got, all these, just so many groups, and with so many different goals. And so you can end up having them fight each other and that sort of thing. And so, but anyway, let's not get into that. And I'm going to go over one more thing, and then I'm going to answer questions. So now I want to talk about very quickly Hong Kong, because this relates to the United States, plus I love Hong Kong. And we need to stand with Hong Kong. And all right, just one second. I'm going to show you. This is from the New York Times, right? This is a graph or a representation of the fighting in Hong Kong, and it's starting in June. You can see down here, this is, let me see. This is June 2019, right? I was sitting here where I'm sitting now. And I was studying. I was studying China information warfare and other insurgency type things. And there was a big protest in Hong Kong right there, right? And I said, okay, ping, I'm watching. Keep in mind, I've written 3 books on Chinese information war, so I'm not coming in flat-footed. I'm coming in at a sprint. So then they had more protest on the 12th, right, and the 16th. And that's when I had people on the ground there, and I said, hey, go out and take a look. Take photos of their not propaganda, but their signs, anything that they're saying. I want to hear what they're saying. And I was watching videos online and that sort of thing, and I was like, huh. That's it. That looks like general civil unrest. Could that go into insurgency? I don't know. I jumped on an airplane. Boom. That's when I landed, right here. I parachuted right into there. And, you know, I don't run off to just any conflict because I don't like to go just watch people fight. If I want to do that, I'll watch, you know, on television. But for important ones, this is when I went to Hong Kong, right here, right? So I was way ahead of the curve, just like I generally am when you get into something that's in my bailiwick, right? So I went there and I stayed, and then I finally got kicked out. I left in January, early January, and then I tried to go back in February, and they didn't let me back in. So that's where my on the ground in Hong Kong ended, was February 5th. That was the last time I was there. Actually, the last time I was there was, well, I mean, I went to the airport, but the last time I was there was early January. And then we saw the pandemic start in January, and that's when, on January 11th, actually, was when I first actually, some people said in December I was talking about pandemics, but I was talking about pandemics all through here, but I was talking about swine flu and other things because I watch pandemics, because I know, anyway, that's a separate but related issue. But on January 11th, anyway, I got good information that this was really serious, and that was when, in around the 20th area is when I was like, shut flights, United States should shut flights, and then in about maybe 25th, 26th, something like that, that's when I bought 600 masks and gave them to my Hong Kong friends, and I already had masks, and gave them to my Thai friends as well. And so then we started shifting into this pandemic. And then we go, and that's when I started warning everybody, stock up on food. Stock up on everything, because when real serious pandemics come, they cause economic problems. Big pandemics always bring famine, and they always bring war every single time. And big wars always bring pandemics, and always bring famines, and big famines always bring pandemics. This is a Bermuda Triangle, right? You get any one I wish I could draw better on this thing, but it's difficult. But anytime you get one, you'll get the other ones, right? So anytime you get a famine, you'll get a pandemic, and you'll get a war. Any one of these, if it's big, you'll get the other two, for sure. If it's look, 2/3 of American casualties in the American Civil War, 2/3 of the American casualties in the American Civil War were from diseases. Not necessarily all pandemic, but disease, but infections of various sorts, right? And so, yeah, anyway, not to go into that. Now, I'm greatly concerned about the United States at this point. It's clearly, more than protest. We're way beyond simple protest. And there's many groups involved. We've got Islamic fundamentalists that are quite powerful in many places, like up at around Minneapolis, you see. And I guarantee you're going to see, you're going to see Islamic terrorists get involved. They're going to start doing things like arson. They're going to start doing attacks. I'll guarantee it. I see this so many times. This is like as sure as tomorrow's sunrise. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I guarantee you're going to see Islamic terrorists get involved, I'll guarantee you, if it continues, also you'll start to see a lot of people start to shift into various support groups. There'll be support for BLM or Islamic groups, or Mexicans that want to split off, or Hawaiians, or people like me that want the United States to be stable and peaceful. You know, support will grow in that direction as well. And so let me get to questions. But clearly we could get into and actually into multiple civil wars in the United States. I could easily see that coming. Let me get to questions here. And one thing here. Let's see. And I'm going to start with questions. Let me do something here just a second. One moment. Okay. I hope this is interesting, learning something. And I can go through, like, when I get back to the United States, be able to, well, something's wrong here. I'm having, I hope I'm even mounting with in computer land here. So I'm having a hard time. There we go. All right. Now we should have it. All right. Now I should be able to read your comments and try to answer questions. Okay, here we go. Got it. And comments came up, and then they disappeared. Let's see. Comments. All right. Let's see. Oh, Wayshawn saying connection issues, stutter at best. Okay. Don Sakuda says, do you think our intelligence agencies are aware like you? Well, within the intelligence community, most people have no idea what the heck I'm talking about. Most of them won't. But, you know, there's some small subset that specialize in this sort of thing, and they'll see it. And a lot of those will come from a background like mine, actually. Because, you know, my Harvard was the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare School at Fort Bragg. I mean, when I was still a teenager, that's when I started studying this. And so some will be aware, and most will not. Most will have no clue what I'm talking about. This will be as new to them as it will be to you. Because, you know, a lot of intelligence world, they do other things. You know, it might be economic or whatever. All right. Let me start at the top, and then I'll try to answer as many questions as possible. I'm actually going way to the top. Or actually, let me go to the bottom and see if tell me if this, Wayshawn said his connection was bad. It's not my connection. It means everybody's hurting. Okay, Don Sakuda says, they are waiting to pounce. Yeah, Mike says, Minnesota. Yeah, oh yeah, you got to be careful. Let's see, let me to the top. All right. I'm just scanning down for specific questions. And let's see here. Why am I having so many problems with this? From here. I'm going to have to be special. It's just name, but I should be able to answer studying this. And so, for specific questions. And, okay. Don in Hawaii. Hello, Iowa, Mary. Why am I having this from here? I'm going to have to be special. It's just name, but I should be able to answer studying this. And so, I hear intermittent connection here. Let me see. And hello in Perth. Don, Hawaii, Dakota, Iowa. Thanks for sharing, SB. Looking for questions. Wayshawn's in Perth as well. It's down there, but I should answer. And so, intermittent. And okay, here's Ken. Hey, Ken. Don, Hawaii, Dakota, Iowa. Thanks for sharing, SB. Looking for questions. Yeah, but you've never gone close combat hand-to-hand with a squad of honey badgers, crocs, or gray gators, or dark brown. Could be confused. You're from Florida, I think, right? I have a feeling you've got a history. I'd love to hear that, actually. Yeah, but you've gone close combat hand-to-hand with a squad of honey badgers, crocs, or gray gators. One of my friends went off the ground force. He used to say, you're from Florida, I think, right? Used to say, do it on fire. But you used to combat hand squad of badgers, crocs, and gators. That's why I don't say do it on fire. But you used to combat hand badgers, crocs, and gators. That's why I don't. I'm sorry, that's just going slow to answer questions. William, I literally plug you all the time. As one of the only, and then your comment shot up. Oh, one of the only journalists that is pure facts, never any spin. Thank you, William. I'm just a writer, though. I'm not really a journalist. Let me try to comments here, or not comments, but questions. Narnat says, America's safe for Asian tourists. Oh, you better ask people in different parts of the country that. I already know the answer to that without even being in America. That's going to depend where. And you know that the virus still has a long life ahead as well, not just the unrest. But you'll need to ask people in specific parts of America. Matt King says, do you believe BLM is just a political tool? You don't need to answer that. Oh, clearly. There's, for whatever reasons people are involved in the leadership level, it's clearly a political tool. I mean, if they cared about black lives, we already know they'd be doing something else. It's green gators, right? Everybody tells you gators are whatever, and they're not. They're telling you, oh, this is about Black Lives Matter. That's bullshit. Everybody can see that. Completely transparent. It's completely like the comfort women issue. You see this? I've talked about it many times, hundreds and hundreds of times, the comfort women issue. It's the exact same sort of issue. Comfort women issue is, you may have heard of the World War II sex slave issue. This is a statue for comfort women. It's similar to Black Lives Matter. I call it KLM, Korean Lives Matter. It's a manufactured argument. There may be some basis in it, but it's a manufactured argument, and it's designed never to be solved, because it's not about addressing grievances. It's not about that at all. It's about having grievances to start fights. It's about getting people to fight each other. It's about getting Koreans and Japanese to fight each other. And it's very effective. I mean, now Japan, remember in 2014 and 15 and 16 and 17 and 18 and 19, I was saying Japan and Korea will split, probably because of this. How many times did you see me say it? A lot. And guess what? Now they're splitting. Because it's the same sort of situation that we see with BLM, Black Lives Matter. That's why I call KLM Korean Lives Matter. I call it, the comfort women issue, I call it KLM. Because that way Americans can understand better what's going on between Korea and Japan and not be confused. And Japanese and Koreans can understand more about what's going on in the United States. BLM is like this, perpetually butthurt Koreans that are actually riled up, and it's done artificially, and that is clearly run straight from China. I've researched this in 13 or so countries, including Korea and China, like in Nanjing and Beijing and Shanghai, so many. Japan, so many. And but yeah, BLM's clearly, and keeping in mind, there's more than one organization. There is BLM, there's the Albandi people, there's so many. There's the Mexican separatists, there's a little bit in Hawaii. They're not highly energetic compared to some of the others. And the Islamic groups actually are not all split, or they're not all unified, of course. A lot of people that don't know anything about what's going on, they'll look at the Islamic groups and group them all as once, but that's like grouping Christians all in one Christian group, notwithstanding, that the Christians or the Catholics and Protestants, slit each other's throats for how long? So, right. That's right, Don Girl. Insurgency 101 with Professor Jan. This is actually what I started studying when I was a kid. Come on, Ken, that was a straight line. Let's see, Donna Smith. Mike Morgan says, insurgency only in Democrat cities and states, all part of a resistance. I think you're going to find I think it's going to be interesting what you're going to find there. Like, for instance, in Minnesota with Somali girl that's, acting crazy and married her brother or whatever. There are places that welcomed in people, fish, aquarium. Some fish don't mix well in the same aquarium, period, right? And they will not mix, especially if you bring them in large numbers. Then it'll be like an oil spot, right? They won't become Americans. They'll ghettoize, right? Which is a very interesting topic in and of itself, something you could talk about for hours. For instance, there's the first immigrants, let's say Polish people that, were up in, in the north years, are still up there. And they weren't really ethnics at that time. They were just immigrants from Poland. They didn't become Polish until they were Polish, of course, but they didn't become Polish until Americans started saying they're Polish, they're Irish, they're Italian, they're Jews, they're whatever. That's where all the ethnic stuff really kind of started happening in the United States, and it happens like that in the UK and across Europe and other places. Anyway, like that second and third generation. Some will mix right in and become Americans, right? And some won't. It depends on what kind of fish you add to the aquarium and how you do it. If you do unfettered, open the doors immigration like Europe did and the United States, that's the stupidest thing that you can ever do. That is wildly stupid. Too many people group immigrants all as one thing, and they're not. There are some that we can just all get along with quite well, like Filipinos, we tend to get along with extremely well. Hong Kongers, take 1 million, no problem. Taiwanese, no problem. I know there'll be some spies from the mainland mixed in or whatever, but generally as a huge group, we're going to get along super well, right? Japanese get along extremely well, right? No problem. And then there's other groups where you're going to have problems, period. And they will ghettoize. And now, Japanese don't ghettoize. They'll group together ethnically a lot. But they're like the most law-abiding Americans there are, probably, and super successful and super just, how many cops would we need in America if America was just filled with Japanese? It would be a lot less cops, a lot fewer cops, right? So, yeah, so I think what you're talking about with the blue states problems, a lot of the blue states have also welcomed in a lot of groups that, and they've pandered to them in ways that they fed the crocodile. They fed the crocodile. The crocodile is now much, much bigger, and it's much, much more confident. And there's going to be problems. There will be problems. It's not a question of when, it's already happening. Look at San Bernardino and other places. Now, people that don't know what they're talking about or are apologists or whatever will go, you're a racist because you're saying that was Muslim. First of all, Islam is not a race, okay? You got it? Right. It's like Catholic is not a race, right? There's Mexican Catholics, and there's Polish Catholics, and there's Korean Catholics, there's Thai Catholics, there's Catholics all over the world from different races, right? Islam is not a race. There's lots of white people, whiter than I am, that are Muslims. You got it? There's a lot of Muslims, there's a lot of Arabs, for instance, that are not Muslims, like Chaldean Christians, right? And of course, they don't identify themselves as Arabs, but whatever. And they're super successful, by the way, the Chaldeans in the United States. But they're Arabs. Well, they don't call themselves Arabs, but they mix very well, super low crime rates. But I think what you're going to find is these people that have welcomed this in and nurtured it, now, look, now it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it wants to be fed, and it's a dominating type of culture. If it wasn't a dominating type of culture, it wouldn't be on our radar, right? But it's the kind of culture that once it gets bigger, like those cheetahs, once they see that they're in charge, it's on. And there won't be peace through weakness. There will not be peace through appeasement. There won't be any peace through taking a knee. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because there's a lot more going on here than just people, let's do this or do that. No. This is to make amends. No, like with the comfort women issue, these are arguments that are designed not to be solved because it's not meant to be solved. It's meant to be used as a tool to, for instance, overthrow the United States government. Now, when you hear somebody say that, you automatically go, that's just crazy. Now, keep in mind, back in January, when I was saying, hey, we're facing a big pandemic, most people were like, that's just crazy. Well, here we go, right? And so how many times have we gone through this? So people that have read my work for 20 years, I'll say something, and you'll go, that seems crazy. And then 6 months or 6 years later, he's like, there it goes. That's what we're facing potentially now in the United States is not one civil war, but multiple civil wars, organic, and also fertilized from the outside. And a lot of us through very poor immigration policy, for starters, which will be catastrophic sooner or later. maybe sooner. And a lot of it's just, we literally could end up in a pretty serious civil war. Now, Don says Chaz has a lot of meth and potheads. Chaz might be in and of itself just protest. Keep in mind, this is not all these things happening in Minneapolis and Atlanta and Miami, and they're not necessarily even all related by any ideology per se, right? Like in Chaz, those soy boys and all that out there are probably very different than what you see at Liberty City down in Miami, right? By the way, I was in Liberty City when those riots broke out. I was about 16, and I was the only white boy there, and I was with this black family, friends of mine. They were Jamaican. They took me down from my hometown. I live in Winter Haven in Central Florida, so we drove, 200 or 300 miles, however far it is, to Miami. We go to Miami, and, the riots kicking off, and they're like, keep your blonde head down. So I had to hide in the car and stuff, and then we went to because I was the only white guy there. I was like maybe 16. And so I was with this black Jamaican family that I was very good friends with, and in my town. And then, so next thing you know, we're down in Liberty City, and I had to hide, and they killed a goat in the backyard because they're Jamaicans and barbecued the goat. I love them. And I love the goat and I love the Jamaicans. And, and then when we left, I had to hide, and all that to drive back home the next day or whenever it was. I don't remember. But there's going to be many different groups. The Islamic fundamentalists who are like the Deobandi people who are dead set on overthrowing the UK government and United States government eventually, once they breed up enough, they're not going to be siding with Black Lives Matter other than to whip them up or ally for this, that, or the other. But in fact, they're natural enemies. They're not friends. And that can be used to 4chan against them, actually, and split them, which is fair game. Splitting is fair game when you get into these sorts of things. You see white people painting Black Lives Matter. Who knows why they're doing it? They might just be brainwashed white people. They might actually, be like that Rachel, whatever her name is, who thinks she's black. Or they might be doing AP stuff, agent provocateur type stuff. Who knows? Hey, Sean, I'll keep it coming. Let's see. Here. And by the way, thank you everybody who supported my work through Patreon and PayPal and Venmo. And I'm going to need a lot soon when I come back to the United States. It's going to be a couple of weeks, I think, until flights are open. And when flights are open, I need to do a GoFundMe and that sort of thing because it's going to be expensive. You can't, like when I went to Iraq and Afghanistan and covered other places, you can't cover it from one place. You can't, like, people that are in America, they're like in Atlanta or something. They're like, how do you know what's going on in America? You're not here. And they'll just be like in Boston or something. You have to go all over the place to get a feel for it. You can't get a feel for it except for your little neck of the woods any more than I can get from my computer screen, right? Unless you're out in it, you're not any more in it than I am. You know what I mean here? So, and I need to get out in it in many different places to see what does auxiliary look like? Are these just rioters, or is there actually a real auxiliary? How big is the support base? Is it super significant? Because there'll be multiple supports, right? First of all, there'll be multiple insurgencies, and there could be multiple civil wars, and there could be, resistance, of course, people that will, whether these militia groups that will rise up if you come to their town, they're gonna address you. And this is one time when people will be like, thank God for that militia. They've been a pain in their side for all these years, but finally, hey, thank God you didn't let our town get burned down type stuff. Antifa, Mike said, would be Guerrilla Force. And I think that would basically be accurate. You might split it up a little bit, but I'm trying to understand Antifa better so that I can make better comments on that. But I think generally speaking, Mike Morgan, that you're correct on that. Charlotte says, yep, I hear BLM is part of Islamic Brotherhood. They need to get a foothold, so they found out with a BLM to use against us. I was warned in 97 about civil war. Oh, yeah. They're clearly, there's a lot of overlap, of course. A lot of blacks are Christians. A lot of blacks are Muslims. A lot of blacks are something else. And including some Jews. And they come in many different religions and atheists and everything else, right? And so, but for many generations, there has been, both mutual outreach back and forth between various groups, terrorist groups actually, and blacks in America. And actually, this book is an interesting book. And this goes way back. This talks about Japanese actually using blacks, like 100 years ago, to try to split off with that organic split that we have in the United States. Because, we did mistreat blacks. They were slaves, and they were mistreated for a long time. And there's no question about it. And so people were able to use that, like Japanese, Russians, Chinese, Muslim Brotherhood, so many. It's just we do it too. I'm not sitting here and saying, we're a victim of people coming out and meddling. We do it too. That's unconventional warfare 101. That's why I started when I went to my Harvard for, in special forces of learning how to do things like this. That's what I was learning how to do when I was 19 is, we go to other countries and we find the fault lines and we drive a wedge and we pour water on it and freeze it, and split it apart. They do it to us. It's big boy games. Yeah, Jamie says Minnesota and Michigan are ripe like Deerfield and, Dearborn and another former kind of Polish town. What's the name of that town next to Dearborn? Starts with a H. There's quite a few. And in those places, like it's a lot of Dale Bondi's, actually. Hey, Jenna. Dick Markinson says, plenty flown over the wall from Mexico by drone, then flown to Chaz airspace. You must be talking about meth or something, or fentanyl. Yeah, China has been running the fentanyl. Robbie Hoffman, wow, back in... MLK, if somebody as wise as Martin Luther King was in charge of Black Lives Matter, the blacks would get everything they want right now. Because, people like me would automatically support. I would just be like, yes, automatic support. But when they start saying that I'm the enemy because I'm white, then I'm like, okay, no. And then they start killing white people and talking about killing all the white people, and you're like, oh, whoa, this is a different ball game we're getting into here. Now we're starting to talk a whole different ball game, and things might not work out the way you want. That's how you split your support base. But now keep in mind, at a higher level, there are people, that's what they want to do. They want to split us apart. They want to split whites and blacks and whites and Mexicans and blacks, and that sort of thing. Because there's people that have tried to fuse, for instance, Koreans with black issues, and it doesn't work because generally the racism between Koreans and blacks is pretty severe. Not always. You can always find, that's why, Korean lives matter, what I call it, and Black Lives Matter. Those are just not meant to be married. But others can, like Muslim Brotherhood. Looks for any questions here. Let's see. Robbie says, man, I already donated. Am I a terrorist? Depends on what you donated to. If you donated to Antifa, you might, and all that stuff can come out later too. If there's trials and all the donation stuff, or Freedom of Information Act, or just leaks or whatever, all these people that donated in various ways, you should just count on it coming out. If you donated to Black Lives Matter or something like that, you should count on it coming out. It may not, but you should count on it coming out. If you donated to Muslim Brotherhood, there's so many people that would want that to come out. Could be just some random 16-year-old hacker. It could be Israeli intelligence. It could be people in U.S. intelligence or somebody else that gets the information and just leaks it, right? It can happen from many different... Claude Saber says, do you have any evidence you got that on Russian time? I don't know. I think you might be talking to somebody else because I don't know what you're talking about. Don says, many of these people in Chaz are mentally unstable from what I'm seeing. Actually, I was looking at some of the videos. I didn't say that, but I had the same impression. was like, there's a bunch of kooks in there. Things like that will tend to draw kooks, actually, because that's a kind of a kook fest. Let's just talk, the way I would talk if I'm with a bunch of Green Berets. I'd be like, yeah, it's kook fest. They'd be like, yep. It's just cut right down to it. Because things like that draw flies, right? Whereas what I've seen in Hong Kong, that draws highly educated people. It draws people that are normally peaceful that actually don't want to fight, but they've realized that they have to fight. And you see that a lot in different places. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of Occupy Wall Street. I was not there, but I watched a lot of the video. I've heard a lot of people talk about who were there. That sounded like another kook fest. And actually, it sounds like that Chaz place sounds like that to me. Don says, Hawaiians won't do anything. They'll just protect our island. Oh, yeah, Hawaiians aren't going to take over California, that's for sure. But they can be used to try to split the United States and Hawaii. And that's an organic split there that's, that people have worked on for years. Dick Markinson says, Markinson, hello, Dick. Michael, how well will the warriors of Chaz be trained for battle? Will they have extra rations or soy milk and pea protein powder? I have a feeling that if you cut off their electricity and their water and their phones, keep the phones going so you can intercept them, but I think that they'll give up. But who knows? You might have a few hardcore in there. Most of the people quit. But that's the way you want to do it. Mostly, you want to wait them out because most of the people just quit. Most of the people will be like, this isn't fun anymore. It was fun until the beer ran out type thing. You know what I mean? It was fun until electricity just went out and, hey, there's no toilet paper and blah, blah, blah. And that's what you want to do is split them apart. So if there is anybody left you have to fight, that's whittled down to the hardcore, and hopefully you don't have to fight them either because the more you split them off, they can also lose spirit, and hopefully you can just end it and nobody at all gets hurt. And you fingerprint everybody and that sort of thing. Don says, I hope you can. Can you make them aware through Bannon? I don't know what you're talking about. You're talking about intelligence people. Steve is pretty dialed in. I got some interesting traffic from him the other day. Titus Minius Musca. If there is a civil war in the U.S., do you think it will be along factions or we see in states go to war like in the first one? I think generally, this is obviously a guess. I don't know. But having been around America a lot and knowing quite a bit about the human terrain, I tend to think there would be a race war component, which is already on, but it's pretty one-sided actually, because not most people haven't joined battle. It's just a very small number of people doing it, so it's a tiny. It's like a spark. But with the economy going down from pandemic and other things, these now you're getting a dry forest, so little sparks can go wild. This is a thing in the past. Most of the white people are not going to fight because they don't want to fight. You know what I mean? You'll get some, but that's a small number. But as the economies go down and people start feeling desperate and they start feeling threatened, if they feel their families are threatened, they'll go to war. And there's certain subsets like the Scot-Irish culture and that sort of thing. They'll straight up go to war, and it will be, I think, a lot different than a lot of the BLM people probably imagine it. I think that it could be pretty terrible, actually. So we have to do everything that we can to head it off, because once it gets going and atrocities back and forth, it's very hard to stop it. But I think you would have, for instance, Islamic groups doing their thing up in places like Michigan and Minnesota, all over the place actually, but they don't have sufficient strength yet. They do have a lot actually, but not sufficient to. I mean, in some areas they do, but not sufficient to take a state, But I think generally it'll Now, it could devolve into another aspect, which is a class war, because a lot of people are really sick of Bezos and that whatnot being worth over $100 billion. And that's communist talk, I just said. But they are sick of being, like here on Facebook and YouTube and other places, we are sick of being censored. We're sick of it. You know, and there's people that are really sick of being kept down by a few elites. So you'll have people that are very anti-communist saying that. I'm very anti-communist. But you hear me saying the same thing that the pro-communists are saying, which is we are sick of being put in our little places by corporate media. We're sick of it, you know? And so, but just because our beliefs may overlap for a very limited amount of battle space doesn't mean that we're allies, because we're not. This is not a friend of the friend, is it? Or enemy of the enemy is a friend. No. But let's see. Laura says, but how far do I think things will escalate in the U.S.? I don't know, Corbin. I mean, I'm watching. I need to get back to feel it. But it could go, you know, really big, or it could die off. You know, I didn't say much with that, did I? We already all know that. But if the economy continues to go down, then the conditions are more set for widespread, very serious conflict. For instance, when police start quitting, and as they are, and when you have dissent within the U.S. military ranks with all these flag officers, which means generals and admirals, right? Flag officers, who are, you know, making public opinions about things. And if we do deploy federal troops, which we've done many, many times, a lot of people don't realize this. They're saying, oh, you can't do that. You know, it's against the law. It's bullshit. We deployed federal troops to fight the Ku Klux Klan. People don't even get that, do they? We fight the deployed federal troops for desegregation, for instance, in Mississippi as well. And that was 100 years after Ku Klux Klan stuff. I mean, we deployed federal troops many, many times. All enemies, foreign and domestic. But this could cause splits within the military. So, you know, punch with your fist and your fist breaks, right? So, I mean, that was a question in Thailand when there was heavy fighting going on here as well. If the army is used too much, will the army start to splinter? Which it very well could. It could happen in the United States. And so, you know, because the army is, and not just the army, but the military is quite mixed. It actually could. So let me see here. Ewan Kipmoon, do you see percentage of U.S. states that are immune to civil unrest? And if so, what? Who would be immune? Nobody's immune if there's humans. Some that are probably less apt to suffer much would be Alaska, which is one of the only 2 states I haven't been to. But I'm guessing that Alaska. But certainly you could have civil unrest in Florida, certainly Georgia. You see it right now. North Carolina, definitely. South Carolina, certainly. Alabama, yeah, less so than in some places. Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, yeah, all that. Texas, certainly. Now you get over to the Texas side, now you're starting to get into Mexico issues. Of course, then New Mexico and Arizona and California would be getting into that. Maybe not so much in a place like Utah, I'm going to guess. Maybe not as much in a place like Montana. Idaho, I know there were some threats to go to Coeur d'Alene, but I have some special forces friends up there. They were ready. Everybody was ready with their guns and stuff. There were threats up there, and apparently, you know, the bad boys decided not to show up, which I think is very smart. Don't show up when you have people like that waiting for you. I think it's a bad idea. Let's see. Colorado, I think you could have some unrest there. Let me think. Ohio, certainly. Minnesota, absolutely. Indiana, definitely. Michigan, absolutely. Ohio, yeah, definitely. Ohio, New York, yeah, definitely. New Jersey, definitely. Vermont, the Green Mountain Boys, maybe. New Hampshire, a little bit. Maine, not as much. Delaware, maybe not so much. Connecticut, maybe not so much. Rhode Island, maybe a little there. But that's Washington, D.C., definitely. Virginia, definitely. But not Northern Virginia, I'm going to guess. Maryland, absolutely. West Virginia, some. Not maybe so much. Kansas, not, well, maybe in Kansas City. I think a few you might not have very much, like I'm going to guess not so much in a place like Montana. I don't know. I'm just answering off the top of my head. I'd have to pull out a map and look. Hawaii, I don't know. There could be. It depends on how energetic the Hawaiians are, because, there's among some Hawaiians, they would like to split and then others no. Kevin Kivikoski, I think your prediction for U.S. is worse than reality. You might be right. I don't know. I'm not predicting. I don't know where it's going to go. You were right about a lot of things in the Middle East and Hong Kong, and I expect your predictions will be more accurate for U.S. when you get here. Yeah, I don't know what it's going to do, Kevin. I have to be there, and I have to travel around a lot. Don says I'm breaking up. I hope it's better now. Hey, Ron Reese, I hope everything's good. Hey, Kim, what is my opinion about our great economy being destroyed for the virus? Obviously, terrible. In the beginning, I wanted to stop flights, boom, in January. You heard me saying it, stop flights. And people are like, crazy, you can't stop flights. And then we did, right? and we needed to. And then for a while, I was about shutting down very quickly in the United States to just get control over it. But then seeing how that went, I was just like, open up. Take your casualties, shoot the rapids. But wear masks. People aren't wearing masks. I'm watching these videos constantly. Some people are, some people aren't. I was out looking around Chiang Mai, where I'm at now, in Thailand yesterday. Everybody's wearing a mask. Everybody. There's very few COVID cases here. And there's direct flights to the airport just down the road from me, straight from Wuhan, straight from all over China, land right here in Chiang Mai. We've had almost no cases, very few, relatively tiny amount. I thought Thailand was going to get smashed. I thought Hong Kong was going to get smashed. Now, I don't know why that they're not, because Mongkok in Hong Kong is the most densely populated area in the world. And population density is one of the number one factors in spreading infectious diseases like this that are human to human, especially airborne transmission, high population density. And why not Hong Kong? Is it their diet? Is it their genes? Did they get a different strain? Is it because they're wearing masks and they wash their hands and they have high social discipline? Look, in Thailand, Thais are wearing masks. Hong Kongers wear masks. Taiwanese people wear masks. Japanese wear masks. Korea was going down. It looked like Korea was going to get smoked. And then Korea was like, uh-oh, this is a trouble. And Korea jumped right on it. All Koreans wearing masks, taking precautions. Now Korea's doing pretty good. It's like the mask. How much does it hurt to wear a mask? And you got so many Americans that are watching right now. Some of them, I'm sure, some of them are my own friends and family who have a case of the dumbass and won't wear masks. It's just stupid. They're like, why would I wear a mask? You're impinging upon my freedom. All right, dumbass. It's really stupid. And this isn't the first pandemic, and it won't be the last. And in 1918 and 1919, you'd get arrested for not wearing a mask. And they're all, you know what? Of all the dozens over the years, books I've read on pandemics, I've just read probably 15 more. Just finished one recently on cholera. I'm reading one now on Islamic terrorism. Because what to be prepared for, we got to be up to date on a lot of things. But all the pandemics are like the same, you know what I mean? Even cholera, which is bacteria, and it's, obviously not human to human, well, kind of human to human, but it's, anyway, it comes from water, right? But the sort of life cycle of these things always religious people get involved and go, oh, it's God's will, you know, and do things that can get them hurt and others don't. And then there's always doctors fighting each other about miracle cures and all kinds of crap. There's always politics involved, huge politics. This is all these things that we're seeing now with this pandemic. And so many people are like, it's our government now, and it's the media now. The media always does this. Anybody that thinks that the media just now got bad, they haven't spent so much time like I have going through microfiche, you know, months at a time sometimes in America, going through that was back when you had to go through microfiche, you know, and looking at all these old articles from the 1800s and stuff. Now I just subscribe to you know, it's like the old articles is all the same. All the bad press is all the same. The miracle cures, the people refusing to wear masks, refusing to quarantine, whether it's 1916 polio in New York or the 1918 pandemic in New York, xenophobia always kicks up. And you know what? They always go for cats and dogs. All the big pandemics, cats and dogs, they start killing cats and dogs, whether or not they're guilty. And so it's like every pandemic, sooner or later, they're going to think it's the cats and dogs, and they're going to do a pogrom on cats and dogs. It's like, you know, it's just like, just read about 10 or 15 books on pandemics. By the time you get through the 10th one, you're going to be like, yeah, Mike sounded crazy, but he's right. It's like the hero with 1,000 faces, but it's the pandemic with 1,000 faces. It's always the same, even if it's bacteria or whatever. Let's see. Audio issues. Let's see. I just shot to the bottom. I hope my audio is good. Let's see. Jamie says, this pandemic was the only one that also caused people to lose their minds too. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. I was talking with one of my friends the other day. Super experienced, global experience. He used to send his airplanes to fly me around Afghanistan. We went through Green Beret training together. Now he's some rich businessman. But we were talking about it the other day. And I said, you know what? In these big pandemics, they often, one of the life cycles they have is, at first, people are in denial. It's just the flu or whatever. There's that. And then there's always that. And then people start to get smashed, and the governments are like, quarantine. And people are like, I'm not going to quarantine, you know. And then, you know, they send the police or whatever, make people quarantine. And then if it's one of the diseases that has different waves, often the second wave is the worst. So often what you'll have is, in these pandemics that have waves, not all pandemics have waves, but the first wave, people get stir crazy, just like they're doing now. They start breaking quarantine, but then the thing, you know, kind of goes away if it's cyclical. And then the second wave comes, and people get slaughtered, right? Because the second wave is often bigger. And it's like, then people self-quarantine no matter what the government says. And then before it's over, the government's knocking on people's doors and like, uh-oh, that woke my dog up. Then people are, it's okay, Barney. It's okay. It's okay. And then people, you know, the government comes and starts knocking on people's doors. And it's like, hey, it's over. The pandemic's over. You got to come back to work now. So there's the first quarantine where people don't want to do it. And that's my dog. And then there's the interregnum. And then you get the second wave, if it's one that has waves, and it kills loads of people. And then finally the government has to come and kind of pull people out of quarantine because they're too afraid to come out because too many people got killed. And so, yeah, it's very interesting. Paul says, 100% spot on, I hope. Thank you. Jerome says, allergies are developed societies issues. Yeah, it's true. Nations where malaria used to be an issue or drink. You know, interesting about pandemics as well is thanks, Wayshawn. Audio's fine now. I wonder what was wrong with it. Interesting thing about pandemics, big ones, really severe. There's pandemics all the time. It's not like they only happen sometimes. There's a lot of pandemics going on right now, right? But usually they're just not that bad. Well, HIV is obviously really bad. But one of the things about pandemics, in addition to always bringing war if it's a severe pandemic, and always famine if it's a severe pandemic, they also bring other pandemics. So, you know, those fireworks that go shh, boom, and then another one comes out, submunition, boom, boom, boom. Pandemics are like that. Boom, CCP virus. And then something else comes out, right? It could be, like, for instance, Ebola outbreak now that's going on in Africa, and measles, right? It might not be directly from this virus, but when all these assets are directed to CCP or the virus or other things that have been caused by this, like famine. So now all these resources that we would have had to address Ebola, they might be sidetracked into something else. So in other words, it sets the conditions. So that's why, like, for instance, with HIV, though, like an iterative, I don't know what the epidemiologists would call it. Man, what an interesting job they got. But there's almost nothing more interesting than epidemiology, I think, besides physics. But I tell you, when it comes to HIV, as an example, so some guy gets HIV in, I don't know, wherever, San Francisco, and then flies to Africa and gives it to somebody else, right? Boom. Since HIV, you know, when you end up getting AIDS, depresses your immune system, that's how, you know, how the life cycle, you know how it goes. Then you end up with, say, tuberculosis. And so now a pandemic of tuberculosis comes out. So some guy over in New York gets tuberculosis because some guy in San Francisco got HIV and gave it to some dude in Africa who got tuberculosis, who gave it to some guy in New York. So you end up with tuberculosis because some guy in San Francisco got HIV, right? I mean, that's how this goes. That's why you see some of these people are like, we need to go to Africa and treat all these diseases. And people are like, why don't you just let them be? It's like, hold on, Rambo. That stuff will come fly right back on you. And it's no way to stop it either. Well, I mean, there are ways to stop it, to mitigate. And so SB says, Mike, there are reports of a second wave of coronavirus. Yeah, I'm watching it in China. Yeah, I'm watching it. I watch it every day. I'm not following the numbers every day the way I was, because when it first started off, I was following it almost hour by hour because we're trying to figure out how this thing is shaping up. Now every day I'm like, okay, what's the pandemic doing? What's this doing? What's the, you know, because now on the big board, you know, we're back to a lot of things. But I'm very interested in what's going to happen now that the United States has opened up again. My guess, like a lot of other people are guessing, is that our cases are going to increase. But this is, you know, it's a pretty safe guess. But this is, there's some white noise in this too, because, you know, we're testing more and that sort of thing. So it kind of gets lost in the noise there. I think a more telling number is hospitalizations and fatalities. But that masks a lot as well. Fatalities can mask a lot because a lot of injuries, a lot of like the lung transplant or organ injuries are not going to come up in fatalities. So if you only look at fatalities, you might not see that, hey, people are being changed for life by this thing. And so, and it's going to take, I think within, well, I tell you what, I'd give everything I own to know what's going to happen, to know what it's going to look like 1 year from now. Not just the pandemic, but all these other issues, because these all obviously are entwined. Let's see. Jamie says, masks are required on Fort Campbell and also Kirkland Air Force Base. Yeah, I can't believe if they're not. Any commander that's allowing people to not wear masks should be obviously fired. But I'm sure that's a Pentagon level thing. Yeah, so Jerome said malaria. He mentioned malaria. Now we're getting into rainy season in Thailand, which hasn't been raining much actually. I'm looking at my okra out the window. I planted a bunch of okra. Man, it's ready to pick. I might pick it today. But also this is coming into dengue. Actually, this is cold season. Not cold. It's not cold now. This is summer in Thailand. But it's this time of year that people get colds in Thailand. It's not winter time that they get them. They get them in rainy season because that's when more people are indoors. And that, well, nobody really knows what causes cold season, but that's the theory, right? That's one theory. And also dengue is huge here. Dengue is a very serious problem. as are some other mosquito-borne diseases from Aedes aegypti, and so, a friend of mine who's a doctor who treats the CCP virus here in Thailand, he and other doctors are concerned that the things like dengue will mask the COVID because they present very similarly. So it can be a little confusing for them. But now, or at least they're able to do tests now. Yeah, second wave in Beijing. Let me see, try to answer a few more questions. Yeah, Steve Tung says, cats and dogs, Jesus, leave the yeah, I mean, people, you might remember when the virus was breaking out in China, and you might have, I said on some live stream, as I recall, like, oh, they're going to start killing cats and dogs soon. And because I've read so much on pandemics, sooner or later, people will be like, it's cats and dogs. And I mean, whether or not they're guilty or not. And so, and then soon after that, there was actually reports of people killing their cats and dogs, like throwing them out of, windows and stuff. Actually, I don't think you can throw a cat high enough to kill it, but you can do that with dogs. And it's pretty sad. One problem with CCP virus is that with viruses like smallpox, which is actually the biggest virus I think there is, but with viruses like smallpox, that's the reservoir is humans. And so we've been able to relatively wipe it out because it only exists in labs at this point, and maybe tundra or something and permafrost. And because it's human to human. But things like yellow fever have reservoirs in macaque monkeys, as an example, in the mosquitoes, and other things. Pigs, anything that can kill a pig can kill us, right? Whether that's a bullet or yellow fever. I don't know if yellow fever killed pigs. Will yellow fever kill pigs? I don't know. Anyway, but a lot of things that will kill pigs will kill us, obviously. That's why they use test pigs, right? And so, but things that can have animal reservoirs or other reservoirs besides humans can be very difficult to eradicate. That's why yellow fever will probably never eradicate it with any current technology, because it's living up with those. There's two major kinds, I believe, of yellow fever, but I read a couple books on yellow fever. But they're like some are living high up in the jungles, and others are, and there's another sort that's a lot less lethal. And anyway, not to go into that, but they have a reservoir with the monkeys and the mosquitoes. And smallpox is only human, so we're able to more or less wipe that out unless somebody goes biowarfare on us, or if permafrost melts and some person like the snow dude that was found up in the Alps. A lot of us were thinking when they found that guy, it's like, uh-oh, they're taking somebody out of the ice that may have been there for thousands of years. He might have anything. He might have smallpox. He could have anything. He could, like, wipe out half of Europe, right? I mean, it's like, because there's, this, like, for instance, remember that anthrax outbreak in Russia. I think it was a reindeer, right? The ice had melted, or permafrost or something, and reindeer, I think it was a reindeer, had anthrax. And so popped out of that bad boy. So, and the problem now is with so many people that have HIV, that have suppressed immune systems for many different reasons, medications or whatever, that makes them more susceptible to other diseases, like, say, smallpox. Most of us now who had smallpox vaccinations when we were a kid, it doesn't work anymore, right? And most people now are not vaccinated for smallpox. Is anybody vaccinated for smallpox now? I think, is it illegal for the military to be vaccinated for smallpox in a weapons treaty, bioweapons treaty? I don't know. Anyway, question. Can we actually even vaccinate our military legally? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But yeah, and so beware. Mike Morgan says Antifa wear a mask. I'm sure they do. And so do robbers. Yep. Yeah, Thailand's doing fine. Jamie says Asians were wearing masks before they became fashion statement. Yeah, that's right. They're smarter. I mean, Asians is a big word, of course. That's like a really huge word. But certainly Japanese, Hong Kongers, Thais, Taiwanese, Koreans. I look at videos from India. A lot of Indians are now, but India has so many cultures. India is very complex. Jamie says, Don, he's spot on. He's going after it. I don't know what you're talking about, Jamie. I'm in Colorado. So Torp says, not so much in Wyoming, North and South Dakota. Yeah, I don't. If you're talking about potential for war in Wyoming, North and South Dakota, I would say not so high. Not so high. Because the people out there are going to be more like me. They don't want to fight. But they're like me. They'll absolutely go to guns if you bring war to their area, which could make them resilient against war. Because if you start, if you come with a big caravan of, people that want to burn down a town in South Dakota, you might end up in the bottom of a hole. So it can be it can stay peaceful because you're actually willing to fight. And that's why I'm saying, like, don't take a knee. Don't. You're crazy. You're signaling weakness. Vicky Ferguson says, saw the video of the folks waiting the punks from Spokane to try and give them some grief. Almost every had a weapon. Oh, yeah. Kelly Renee says, many people here will take care of themselves. They talked about trying to take the Alamo, and plenty of people were ready to take them out. That's all it takes, is if you're willing to fight, if you can organize the people around you to actually fight, you can, most people are not going to want to go through a firefight to come burn down your business, if you think you can get through 5,000 bullets to come burn this business down, have fun. Because we can put down 5,000 bullets in like 10 minutes. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just not worth it. And then you have peace through strength, because you don't want to fight. It's just destroy our country, unnecessary bloodshed. But you have to be willing to fight. But the more they sense that you're willing to fight, the more they'll go to somebody who's not. The crocodile will go eat, the one who keeps feeding it. That's where the crocodile goes. It goes to the one who feeds it. That's what's going to happen. The crocodile's not going to go to people like me, not when I'm with a lot of my friends. That's how we have crocodile for supper, And so it just won't. It won't happen in a place like South Dakota. Let's see. Hey, Percival, Jan, I hope everything's good. Glad to see you too. I am looking for any comments I can answer or any questions. I'm scrolling up, actually. David Sang is saying, Chaz versus Caesar of Poly U, and the result will be the same. Chances of them surrounding. Poly U's, Hong Kong, comparing this to Hong Kong, there's not a big comparison because Hong Kong is truly freedom fighting against Chinese Communist Party. A lot of the American people that are doing this, they're either riled up for green gators, you know what I mean? Or they're being played. They're useful idiots. They're cannon fodder, right? And or it depends on what element they're with. If they're with some of the militant Islamic groups, that's one thing. If they're with Black Lives Matter, that's another thing. If they're with like the soy boys up in Seattle, that's another thing. If they're with Antifa, that's another thing. They may overlap and they may cooperate for a period of time, but eventually they'll fight each other. For sure. All these white boy Antifa, they're not going to be able to get along very long with Black Lives Matter. There's too much, trust me. There's severe racism from Black Lives Matter. They don't like white jeans. And so, I'm talking about the core. And so, it's very scary because, because they got that literally Nazi mentality. But luckily, their numbers are relatively low compared to the overall population. Danielle Drummond says, I refuse to be held accountable nor shamed for the decisions of others. I get it. Yeah, man, who doesn't drink coffee from a French press? Jamie? Let's see. Kim says, do you have any thoughts or an opinion about Hong Kong flu and how that was handled compared to this situation? You mean Hong Kong flu. Are you talking about the real Hong Kong flu from way back when, or this one? Or are you talking about the CCP virus versus the civil unrest issues or whatever they want to call them? Hello, Amit in India. I hope you're doing well. Namaste. Hope everything's doing well in India. I check India every day in the news. Mike Morgan says, do you predict firefights breaking out anytime soon? Absolutely. They've already been having them. They've already had firefights. So I've seen them on some of the videos. I mean, they haven't been severe enough where you end up with 30 people dead or something like that. That's something I'm keeping my eye on. Until we start seeing like serious body counts, then you know we're not in a serious civil war, right? We're not in, it's not, we've seen a lot of arson. We've seen some deaths. We've seen attacks on police with weapons, with firearms, and that sort of thing. But we haven't seen 50 people dead today. We haven't seen reports like 400 people got killed today in such and such, or anything like that. If we start seeing 8 people killed here, 4 people there, 12 here, 25 here, that's when you'll know we're actually in a civil war. Like a real civil war that has, final consequences. Dick Martin says, it's that stupid. What will they stop at? If you are multiple race, parents, half black, half white, will they half hate you? Oh, man, I've been through that so much. Not because I'm half black and half white. I just grew up in America and saw it all over the country. It can go all kinds of different directions depending where you're at. Yeah, Jamie says, if you've been to Seattle, it's a kook fest. I've been there a lot, actually. I may have spent, I don't know, not a lot. I may have spent a month there, maybe. I don't know. Let's see. I don't remember, but it's more than a few days. Let's put it that way. Don says, Act Blue tells you they donated who they donated to. Most money to DNC through BLM. Oh, yeah. That's a scam. BLM's a front. BLM's a political front. BLM is for people like me who study information war, like this comfort women bullshit. It's transparent. It's like transparent in minutes. It doesn't even take weeks or months to study it. You can just look at it and kind of go, okay, false store. You know what I mean? You can see that it's completely. It's just latching on to an organic issue. All right, let me just shoot right down to the bottom, and then I'm going to... Yeah, Jan says, police are getting killed. There have been. Emmanuel says, I'm half of a lot of things. I get it from all sides. Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Soy boys in Seattle. There's a lot up there. Hey, Sarge. I hope everything's going good. Kim's talking about sorry meant Hong Kong flu in the U.S. 1968 to 1970. I think the peak was 69, right? Compared to our handling of this virus. I didn't get to watch that one first on because I was a little kid. But I can tell you one thing. The handling of this virus was exemplary in some countries and pathetic in others. In the United States, obviously, it was a complete catastrophic failure on the handling of the virus. I say was. It's still ongoing. I don't think we've been hit. I've said before, I think I'll be surprised if ultimately if the United States takes less than 1 million deaths from the virus. Maybe. I'll be surprised still. Maybe. The case fatality rate maybe seems to be decreasing. I'm not sure. I'm looking at the numbers. And if that's so, I've seen the virologists and epidemiologists talking about it. It could be because the virus itself is weakening, or it could be because our treatments are getting better. It could be both. It could be something else. But it looks like maybe the case fatality rate's actually decreasing. I hope. I don't know. I mean, I think there would be ways to tell if it's the treatment, but it'll take time to gather the statistics. And we see so many lies going on. We saw Lancet just straight up lie. It's unbelievable. I say unbelievable, but if you read enough books on pandemics, you'll see it's nothing's happening right now that our grandparents didn't see at some other pandemic. It's the same stuff. James says, the homeless situation in Austin was already terrible before this, but it is really getting rough out there now. Driving up and down IH-35 is dangerous enough already. Yeah, Jan says, our country is in serious trouble. It clearly is. Well, I'll come home. There should be flights in a couple of weeks. There's no flights out of Thailand to the United States now. And I should get off here and prepare a GoFundMe and other ways to fund this. It's going to be expensive. I'm going to have to travel. I was thinking about doing a motorhome thing, but with this potential, to go all over the country. But with the way that it's going now, I think that would be dangerous. I would rather go by car and that sort of thing. Let's see. Oh, Eric says military still vaccinated for smallpox if deploying to a threat region. Peter says, welcome to the future. You can see it yet, Michael. Can you see it yet, Michael? Take a breath. It's big. The future is always big. Let's see. All righty. All right. Let's go offline for now. Hey, Steve Hayes. Let's see. All right. Let me go ahead and go off. I hope that was helpful on the outlining, the auxiliary guerrilla force and the support base, just so you have some idea. Actually, I could go on for days and days and teach a university class on that stuff. But when I come back to the United States and I'm going around and I give you an opinion at some point and I say this is what I think is happening, you can understand at least part of what's going through my mind and at least a few of the things that I'm looking for. I'm not out there just, watching Soy Boys or something. I'm going to be looking for very specific symptoms. I'm going to be looking for very specific things that almost no journalist out there even know they don't even know it exists. So, and so I'll be looking for very specific conditions and symptoms and I may come back and go, oh, it's just protest. It's not a big deal, which I don't think that's going to happen because there's been billions of dollars lost already and all kinds of things. I think it's going to probably be more of a question on which way do I think the trajectory is going. But remember, there's always wild cards. There's always the black swan and the gray swan and these sorts of things. You can say one thing now and then snap, something happens. And all the streets are on fire, right? So, okay. Nagato says, helpful, more than 4-year university. Let me tell you, bro, you're welcome. It was helpful. Great, Josh. All right, Kim and rest. Thank you, everybody. Please do hit my Venmo and PayPal, Patreon, all those ways. I'm going to have to set up a GoFundMe, and maybe I'll see you back in the United States. Mike out.